Hi, English 1022 students in section 503. I am talking directly to this section today because I want to share my thoughts on your discussion board posts from Module 2 on the Fleeing to the Mountains essay. That was the whole class primary source. We were using that one during Module 2 to practice analysis that we need to do for the rhetorical analysis. And as you know, Module 3, you're moving forward to use your Atlantic essay, the one that you've chosen, and start building towards writing a rough draft. So you're working on a template this week, and you're also working on finding secondary sources. So the handout that I made for you is really, really handy because it kind of confirms that you're looking for the right things. And you all, I might pause because I'm working on sneeze. So I did sneeze, so I paused, and now I'm back. All right, so before I get to the handout, which I'm excited to share with you in just a minute, I want to remind you of a couple of things. Content. I'm going to content to remind you that you work through the modules, and we're working through Module 3. And I've shown this to you in other videos, but below all these modules is lots of information about the class, readings and instructions for the essays. So if you're having a hard time going back and finding things in the other modules, you might check in some of these other areas. Remember that the workshop for Essay 1 has been delayed until the 13th, so that is been changed here. The writers are posting by the 13th, and the readers are submitting comments and feedback on the 14th and 15th. And then yesterday when I made the video for section 503, I'm so sorry, I'm a little behind with my comments and my videos. I was really busy yesterday. But I was in the Writing Center. I tutor in the Writing Center at Boulder County campus, and I wanted to remind you that there's a Writing Tutors at FRCC page. When you click on it, I'm so down on the page for the table of contents that you have to scroll back up to find the links. I wanted to remind you that you can work with a tutor, a writing tutor at any of the campuses. Click on the campus that you live closest to. If you want to work with me at BCC, I am only in the Writing Center on Tuesdays between 2:30 and 4:30. My last appointment would be from 4 to 4:30. But there's also an online writing lab, and when I click on the link to the online writing lab, I want to show you, this is the submission page. This allows you to tell the writing lab, writing center consultant about the assignment, and then you attach your file at the end. They don't respond same day. They usually ask you to wait at least 48 hours for a response. So if you submit it on a Friday, you probably wouldn't get it back until Tuesday, maybe late Monday. If you submit on a Wednesday, you might get it back by Friday before the weekend. So keep that kind of calendar math in mind if you decide to work with the online writing lab through the file submission. There's no conversation, there's no talking with the consultant. It's just you send the file, they read the file, they provide written feedback. Sort of the same way that you'll be receiving feedback in the group workshops next week during Module 4. If you want to work with a tutor in the online writing lab live, you can do that. So if you go to Academic Assistance, you see where I'm going, online learning, academic support, but I think I want this one. Sorry, wrong link. Online writing lab is down here. And you'll notice there's information about that same feedback form I just showed you. And there's also additional information on live video conferences that you can schedule. It looks like you're supposed to schedule it through Sonia Fleming, and if you click on the link to her name, it brings up her email address. It opened my Outlook for me. Her email is her first name dot her last name at frontrange.edu if you want to set up a live consultation with someone in the online writing lab. So I just wanted to share that info with you all because it's important to know the tutoring opportunities that are there for writing, and getting as much feedback as you can will absolutely make your writing stronger. Well, I want to say that your posts on Fleeing to the Mountains were so good, and I noticed how frequently you all would organize your discussion board posts with the questions from the textbook, so you knew what you were analyzing, and I sort of made these column headings on the things you were noticing. And so all of you did some fantastic work, and I include all of you who posted that discussion board post. I do want to point out a couple of things that I noticed that I thought were especially well done. So let's see. I don't have anybody. Oh, I do. I wanted to point out that so many of you commented. So what I'm going to do is kind of comment on left to right in the form, and also based on my yellow highlighting. So I'm coming down pretty far again to let you know that Jessica made the point that all three appeals were used in Christoph's essay. Pathos, ethos, and logos. And I would say probably in a lot of writing that's true, but it would be very easy to see how Christoph's piece looks like it's mostly pathos and logos, right? Because we have like that whole first person connection he's trying to make at the beginning with his narrative about why to go outside and why be with your family and all of that. And then in the end, he's using a lot of political source information about how the Trump administration has done things to damage public lands. But Jessica's point is good, that ethos is almost always in play, right? Because, you know, Christoph is trying to connect with us through trustworthiness by telling us about his values. Other writers noticed these values on family unity or family connection. He's also trying to connect with us through source usage and offering some trustworthiness there. But if you have a different political affiliation or different political beliefs, then that connection may have been broken a little bit, right? But Jessica made a good point that it's maybe all three. But that's not always true in all pieces of writing. But I would say, again, the ethos is probably always there. The writer's always trying to connect with the reader through credibility, trustworthiness, being candid, using sources in a credible way, using sources in an honest way, citing sources. Like all those things I just listed have to do with ethos, right? So thanks, Jessica, for that point. That was really good. Let me scroll back up. Sorry, you have to watch me scroll up and down. So let's talk about audience and purpose, these two columns. Kylie had a really good point that at the beginning of her post, she mentioned how Christoph's essay connected with her as a reader. So I wanted to mention that you might be able to identify yourself as a reader in your own rhetorical analysis. And you saw Cameron Howard do this in his example rhetorical analysis from last week, that his first paragraph was based on his experience of being in nature and connection with his family, and so then had a connection to Christoph because of that. So Kylie had something similar, but it was just different. Kylie has observations that the national park is not used by citizens the way it could be, or maybe has noticed how the land is being destroyed in some ways too. So I really like that Kylie identified herself as a reader, one of Christoph's readers. So that was nice. And many of you have different ideas about who the readers are. And, you know, here's Kyler saying, well, I think it's kind of middle-aged individuals. So that was really cool. Thanks for that, Kylie. Let's do purpose. I'm going to go from the bottom up. Natalie mentioned that the purpose was to inform, when many others said it looks like it's to argue that the Trump administration has caused problems and trying to defend the land. So there's this argument to defend the land. But Natalie said, no, I think it was more informational based. So that's possible. You know, this is a good time to remind you that rhetorical analysis, where you're analyzing the writer's rhetorical situation, is an interpretation. It's not a right or a wrong. And you'll show me an example in your paragraph, and you'll explain your point of view. And your logic really can't be wrong. There can be gaps in your logic, so you can explain things not thoroughly or not clearly. But I hope you hear what I'm saying, that I thought it was really cool that Natalie said, no, I think this is more an informational piece than an argumentative piece. Let's talk about use of sources. Had some really great example. Taj pointed out that the use of sources on the coal moratorium sort of created this trope or this metaphor that there's a time limit on how we can support, fix, help the environment. So I thought that was a really nice point, that the source sort of sets up a trope. And that's possible, right? That something is set up. Then the writer would have to elaborate on that trope a little bit as well. So I thought that was a really cool point of view. Thank you for that, Taj. Jacqueline said that the sources give a visual of the impact on the environment. So I thought that was also cool, that some of the statistics that we read may have created a visual, like maybe the one about the missing trees. And if you've seen mountaintops with dead trees or trees falling down. You kind of have the image of this bald piece of earth, this bald stone, or this bald piece of rock. So that bald dirt was what I was trying to say. You know, that the top of the mountain looks bald because it's just covered with dirt. So thank you for that. I was really interested in these comments about what the sources do. You know, sources, they're usually for writers to back up their own points of view, right? And I think a lot of us would agree that Christoph was trying to use some of those sources about the Trump administration to support his point of view. But I thought that Jacqueline and Taj's responses were really cool ones to help us see that sources are used in different ways. All right, and then just a couple more columns. Many of you commented on the organization, so thank you, Brian and Alex, for that. And I highlighted Josh's comment about the organization, that there were some images created in the reader's head in the beginning when Christoph was sharing his narrative about his hiking, and, you know, the image of the blisters, maybe. I don't know which one you were thinking about, Josh, but there's a lot of narration and description in that first half of the essay, and so you're right, there are a lot of images in our head as readers, so that's a very good point. And then I wanted to talk, nobody said anything about context, y'all. I just want to mention that the essay has a context. It's written in the context of the New York Times. The New York Times has a specific audience. The New York Times has specific topics that it likes to publish about. I would also mention that it has political context. It seems to me the New York Times political affiliation is sort of in flux right now. It used to be kind of considered something more liberal, but we're starting to see the way in which different news organizations are supporting other positions and other affiliations. So, you know, thinking about the context of the essay is pretty important, and it has to do with where it's published, who the audience is defined as, what the purpose of the piece overall kind of does. Is it a political purpose? Is it a purpose to join people together to fight for something? You know, those kinds of things. So think about context if you want. And then tone. You don't have to write about context in your rhetorical analysis on the Atlantic essay, but you certainly can. And then tone, Kyler and Gabrielle had some really good points. Kyler pointed out that there was a relaxed style that really connected to the reader or to the audience. So I thought that was a really good point. And then Gabrielle mentioned that there's a voice in the writing that's informal and comes across as more informal. And I think it probably switches up when we get to the source information about the Trump administration, but Gabrielle's point about the beginning of the essay is good. So why go through all of this? Because I want to validate what you all are saying, that you can do the same thing in your rhetorical analysis on your Atlantic essay, the one you've chosen. And this week in Module 3, you're working towards writing a rough draft, starting with an outline or template. You choose which one you want to do, and then working on finding secondary sources. And then there's no draft due, right? I'm not collecting a draft. The drafts are being posted by the writing workshop writers by Tuesday. So you should have a draft early in the week so that you can kind of use the feedback to kind of think about your own draft. And then I would also be thinking about maybe a check-in meeting for next week if you need some feedback on your rhetorical analysis related to any of your body paragraphs that are analyzing, related to your secondary sources, your intros, your conclusion, whatever you have questions about. Set up a check-in meeting and we can talk about your draft. All right. Thank you again for great posts, and let me know if you have questions. Talk to you soon.